Okay, so I'm literally recording this just after I recorded the previous episode audio. And I also screwed up and was recording for maybe like 10 minutes or so, and I didn't have the software actually recording. So yeah. But anyway, this next episode topic is happening literally right after we just went through the pyramid, and Prince and Pooh, he got taken off by the Star Master for further training. But now we're just kind of lost. We're just kind of sort of directionless, but we are told by this guy nearby that he found this key to this place that is this dungeon of some sort that is also a person, almost like there's this dungeon man. So you go up northwest and you find this weird dungeon man. When you go to him, you go into him, his body is literally a dungeon, and when you go to the top of it, you find his person, or his previous person before he became this dungeon, and he basically follows you around for a little bit. He gets stuck down south somewhere in these palm trees, and then you get told by one of these guys that you need a submarine to get to the next section of the game, the Deep Darkness. And conveniently, this dungeon man happens to have a collection of old vehicles, and he allows you to use the submarine that he has, and you use it, and you get to the Deep Darkness. But anyway, I'll show you the sections that I think are interesting here, and then I'll talk about it. So, as we approach this dungeon, or in this case, this dungeon man, we find out, it's just a giant stone humanoid figure that is a dungeon. And you go inside, and you go through his dungeon, basically. And when you get to the top, you find what he was before he became a dungeon, and that is this Brick Road character that you heard about when you were doing Jeff's section of the game by himself. And I think this is very interesting because it kind of reminds me of what Matt talked about in one of his videos with something about the Medusa mythology. And it's basically the idea that a lot of these super detailed, like almost to an absurd, unrealistic degree, these statues that we have all around the world and such of humans, that they might not have originally just been rock and chiseled down into that form, but they might have actually just been people or humans in some way that were turned to stone and then permanently physically stuck there in that form, basically. And that's kind of how I see Dungeon Man here to a degree, but more of an involuntary sense, and maybe those are voluntary too, some could say, but I would say, even though I don't have a negative interpretation of this Brick Road character and Dungeon Man himself, is that I almost look at it kind of like what we see nowadays with people that are into the super into the technology and buy into the whole science BS and stuff, like that they would willingly or happily give themselves into this whole idea of transhumanism through computers or transhumanism through technology and stuff, like merging their soul, whatever soul that they might have, their consciousness, their everything, with something physically tethered to this world, that being like a computer, these technologies, even something like a rock, just something that is stuck in this physical realm, and willingly, intentionally attaching yourself to it in some way, anchoring yourself to this place through that. And I would almost see that like what Dungeon Man or Brick Road here has done to himself to a degree. He willingly has said he wanted to become a dungeon, like a physical thing that is now basically, for all intents and purposes, kind of stuck to this place to a degree, like a permanent statue. And then, after you talk to him and then leave his dungeon, he starts following you around for a little bit, and after a little while, you get to this place where he gets stuck in this group of palm trees, and interestingly, he kind of just accepts his fate right there, that now he's stuck, and that is now his eternal resting place, pretty much. You know, give him some credit there, I guess, that he's so willing to say, like, hey, you know, I'm stuck here now, this is my permanent, eternal resting place now. So, interesting in that degree. I guess, if you're willing to say that you want to anchor this place forever, I guess you have to kind of accept that, alright, I'm stuck here now, I'm not going anywhere. So, that's kind of interesting. But then, you quickly, afterward, you talk to the guy that I mentioned before that says you need a submarine, and you find out that Dungeon Man collects old vehicles, conveniently, and he happens to have a submarine that Jeff is able to fix. But when you actually get there, there's some interesting details that I think are definitely worth considering. So, in this game, there are a lot of, I guess you could say at the time, like pop culture references to a degree, and one of them being the submarine that you find is not just a submarine, but it is a submarine that is yellow, a yellow submarine. And this game has a lot, like I said, a lot of pop culture stuff, references in it and such. And especially in this case, alluding to bands like the Beatles and such. Obviously, that band has so much stuff involving it, like so many things that it's just uncountable how many things that the Beatles have been involved with in some way in this sense. One of the things in this game is when Dungeon Man is following you around, is the song that is playing. One of the sound rips, I guess you could say, is actually the drum beat from one of the Beatles songs. So one Beatles reference right there. And then in here, the even bigger one being this submarine that you have to take to get to this next area, being a Yellow Submarine, which is a Beatles album or a Beatles song called Yellow Submarine. So one might look at that and just say, like, oh, it's just a cute reference, but when I've looked into it more, and maybe not even looked into it, but when I've kind of considered it more, there is definitely some meaning here to some degree. Like, so for one, this whole Yellow Submarine had some weird synchronicity for me in that basically when I played this section, I found it interesting for one that it was a Yellow Submarine. So I kind of noted it down, but I wasn't really sure what it meant, so I didn't really consider it too much. I was just like, oh, it's just a Beatles reference. But the day after I recorded this stuff, one of the channels that I listened to, Danny Mindley's channel, really, this is the next day, not even a full day afterward, 24 hours. He uploads a video. The thumbnail is a picture of a Yellow Submarine, and in this video he is talking, not the whole video is about the Yellow Submarine, but he mentions the Yellow Submarine, the thumbnail, the title is Yellow Submarine, the thumbnail is a Yellow Submarine, picture of one, and he does talk in the video about something involving Yellow Submarine in some way. So, for me, that was like a huge synchronicity, like, whoa, what the heck is this? Not even a full day after I recorded this. So after that, I was like, all right, I got to take a note on this because there's something communicating me in this reality, the ether, telling me to note this down. There's something quote unquote important here. So I was like, okay, I noted this down. And then even a few days later, I had someone comment after I mentioned this weird stuff, and they mentioned what a Yellow Submarine might symbolize, at least within the whole 7 chakras or whatever, the whole chakras thing, and the colors at least. Before I go off on that, I'm going to try and make this a little bit more coherent in that initially I thought the song Yellow Submarine was kind of, because at least as far as I saw in the song when I listened to some of it, was that basically all the lyrics are just them repeating, we live in a yellow submarine, we live in a yellow submarine. And I looked at that almost like it's just kind of saying like, or admitting or saying whatever, that we live in a clown show, or we live in a fake reality, we live in a simulation, we live in a not a real place kind of thing. That was my initial interpretation. But then it made me think like, so kind of on that point is that after you ride this Yellow Submarine, you take this through this sea or whatever, through this swamp. You also, after riding the submarine, you happen to arrive in, basically, I would consider, there's a few other sections in the game that are very dark in their theme and just in general, but this place I would say is probably the most literally but also metaphorically dark in many ways. It's called the Deep Darkness, but it is a place of strife and hopelessness. Like you go in certain areas and you start just taking damage. Like your heads go below the water, basically like you're drowning. It is not a very nice place at all. It kind of made me think like you're riding in this Yellow Submarine the song "We Live in a Yellow Submarine" it's like you almost realizing as you're going through this submarine, whatever, you're almost realizing that it is a fake reality. And then going through kind of, when you get dropped off, you're going through kind of the depressive or painful mental states afterward, that you realize that the place is so fake. And not as real as you ever could have been told it was. So it's like almost the deep darkness being the mental state that generally a lot of people go through, the valley of sadness or suicide, whatever you want to say, that you go through after realizing that. Even more interesting was when somebody mentioned the meaning of the yellow in terms of the color through the chakras, the chakra, the 7 chakras or whatever. I think that is one of the more interpretations, for me at least, that I'm kind of getting here, where it kind of makes the most sense to me in some way. It's like the easiest to kind of give words to it in a way. Apparently yellow means the yellow chakra, which is like the middle chakra, or it's called the solar plexus. That's like the part of the body, I guess, that it kind of arises in or forms in, whatever, in that graph. But this person at least said that this yellow chakra or solar plexus chakra represents the bridge between the lower chakras and the higher chakras, that being the lower to this physical earth chakras and the higher spiritual enlightenment, whatever, inner self chakras and such. It kind of, that made me think like, okay, so it's almost like this yellow submarine is just a representation of Ness's spiritual journey to a degree, or everybody's spiritual journey, but in this case, Ness's in a way. Like, it also kind of ties in with this Dungeon Man character, is like, yeah, it's, you are going through with Dungeon Man, and he is the most literal representation of something that is now, as he says, eternally stuck in this place, stuck in that location. And as soon as he goes through that area, then you are now almost partially shedding that to a degree, like even more so than in previous parts of the game. Like, Ness is shedding those lower earthly chakras, and now going up to the more spiritual chakra, or at least he's going through the bridging process of the between area between those, and shedding the physical ones, and now going through the spiritual ones. And as he's going through this yellow chakra, the yellow submarine being the literal bridge between the physical chakras that he was previously going through to a degree, the physical world, and the bridge being the submarine, and he's going to the more higher inner self, spiritual self chakras, the higher chakras in that way. And after going through this bridge, he is now going through a sort of depressive state, I guess you could say, like the darker mentally state, and realizing that the whole place that he was just in was basically like not real, or it was a fabrication or a fake in some way. This very deep darkness area is a representation of that depression or dark mental state, I guess you could say, that most of us had to have gone through. Almost, maybe not everybody, but I would say almost everybody has to have gone through this kind of valley of depression, valley of sadness, valley of suicide, in some way of accepting that what they've been shown, or what they've lived in, what they've been grown up with, has all been a fake, has all been a farce, has all been an illusion. And this yellow submarine, the yellow chakra, the solar plexus, was the bridge between that and going through this area, this deep darkness area, you realize this. Or this is the first step after that bridge to getting past the physical, earthly chakras to the more spiritual side of himself on his journey. And it goes even further on this, after this section, that is basically what's going on in his personal spiritual journey here. And even more so, it kind of represents that when I think about it, because through one of the first areas in the game, after you get Jeff and you go through the Mr. Saturn's area, is that you have to defeat the guy, Master Belch. And now, as you come to this new dark area after going through your bridging process, is you have to fight him again, but in his more improved form, or whatever, his stronger form, Master Puke. Or I'm sorry, Master Barf. And it kind of like connects the two in a way. Like, you were fighting him in the physical chakras, and now you're fighting him in an even stronger form in the now, after going through that bridging process, the spiritual chakras in a way. That's just how I look at that part, at least. This is also, interestingly, to defeat him is when Pooh comes in and uses his newfound, after his own training, his own spiritual learning, to learn this Starstorm ability. So, that's even more interesting in that. But, yeah. So, basically I look at this is that, but, I'll try and summarize what I just said, kind of, because it was probably quite a mess, but sort of Dungeon Man was sort of the representation of Ness almost shedding away, finally, all of the earthly physical chakras, or whatever, the earthly physical things, to a degree, that he learned have all been an illusion to a degree. And the yellow submarine is the representation of the bridging between this physical stuff that he just is like, okay, now I'm shedding this away, and then going on to the spiritual side, finally. But the deep darkness, going through that bridge, this deep darkness area, is first realizing this, and going through this painful, depressive section of his journey, I guess you could say. Yeah, that's basically the main point, I guess, is that this yellow submarine, it is not a coincidence at all why it is here. And I look at it as, after seeing that comment, it does make more sense to me in that interpretation, that the yellow submarine, the reason it's yellow is to represent the yellow solar plexus chakra, the middle bridging one between the physical and the physical chakras and the spiritual chakras. And that's basically what it is. It's the going from that physical area to the spiritual area, and going into the deep darkness, the first depressive stage, pain stage of that journey. And yeah, hopefully this made sense to some people. Hope you enjoyed, and thanks for watching.